Today I'm going to show you how to embroider, and best of all, we're going to get it done in 15 minutes. If this is your first time getting an embroidery machine or you're looking to get an embroidery machine, these are the most important things you need to know. Let's get started. This is the first embroidery machine I ever got. It's the Brother SE600, and to this day it's my favorite machine. I'm fond of it because it taught me everything I needed to know. So I'm going to use it as an example, and just so you know, your machine may be a different brand, but all the things we're going to talk about today are still very relevant to machine embroidery. In my opinion, this machine is great for its affordability, but it does have one major drawback, and that is its hoop size. You can see that this is a 4x4 inch hoop size, or 100 by 100 millimeters. When you're just starting out, this hoop may not bother you so much, but as you quickly experiment with embroidery, you'll notice that it can be quite limiting. When you're first purchasing your home embroidery machine, the one thing you want to plan out above everything else is what hoop size you want to get. And that's because you might want to create something like a whole white chest design, but unfortunately you can see a 4x4 inch hoop won't cover that, and the maximum this machine will ever do is a 4x4 inch hoop size. So plan ahead. There are other features that single needle machines have, but in reality the most important part is the hoop. So once you've decided on what hoop size you want, maybe you want a 5x7, maybe you want a 6x10, that's really up to you and what your goals are in embroidery. Now, second thing I'm going to talk about, and we're going to simplify this so much, is what needle size and thread weight do you need? A lot of new embroiderers get so confused and mind boggled over what they should get, and to this day I've only ever used one setting, and that is a 75/11 needle size and a 40 weight polyester thread. Those are the perfect matches to each other, and that I not only use for this machine, but I also use it for the one back there. If your design is properly digitized, and we'll get into that later in this video, this should cover about 90% of your designs, and unless you're trying to do super tiny detailed designs, which as a beginner I doubt you will, this will cover you very nicely. Now just keep in mind that single needle machines do require a different needle. For example, the Brother one has a flat side that helps you put the needle in the machine, and that is different to the universal embroidery machines. So whenever you're shopping for a needle, just ensure that it'll fit your machine. So remember, 75/11 and 40 weight thread. That's all you're gonna need. Let me take off the hoop for a second because I want to show you something that's underneath. This is the bobbin. This is what's gonna help tie the top thread and the bottom thread together to create those awesome stitches. Now, the beautiful thing about some machines is that it has a bobbin winder, so I can put this bobbin up here on this side, push it to the left, and I can press play. And you can see that it's going to start spinning around because it will grab the thread that is here, and you just follow the instructions so that you can wind your own bobbin. Common misconception on this machine is that this speeds up and slows down the embroidery machine when you're embroidering. All it does is it makes the bobbin winder faster or slower. Not the coolest thing because I did want it to be faster on the embroidery, but it's okay. You have the ability to wind your own bobbin, which is great because if you ever run out of them, you can just wind it again using whatever thread you have. I always like to use white, but in reality, I don't even wind my own bobbins. And what I do is I get preset wound bobbins. Let me show you what that is. Now, these are pre-wound bobbins, and they make my life so much easier because instead of me having to do this every time on this machine, I just grab one of these, pop them in, and then I'm good to embroider. Now you just want to watch out that you get the right size for your machine because there are two different sizes, and I made the mistake of purchasing the wrong size, which when I had a different machine, the SE1900, this bobbin size that this one utilizes didn't fit into that machine. So again, make sure you read your manual, do some research on what size you need for your own machine. And the reason I love using pre-wound more than winding my own is because if you're ever embroidering a design, and I mean this is easy because it's just a little patch, but if I were to be utilizing a huge shirt or a jacket, having to take this off and then take the bobbin, put the bobbin here, then having to change the thread, and then winding your bobbin so you can take it out and put it back in, that's a lot of work. Versus just having a pre-wound, all you do is try to shimmy the fabric out of the way, you add the other bobbin, and you're good to go. So those are two options. You can buy pre-wound or you can wind your own bobbins if your machine allows you to do so. Those are all the tools that you really need to add onto your machine. Again, thread weight, needle size, and bobbin. But let's move on to what makes embroidery super clean. There are two main things: tension on your embroidery machine. Now, some machines have top and bottom tension. Thankfully, the reason why I really like this machine is because it helped me learn the top tension. Now, this one goes all the way up top. You can see right here. And this would make the tension so tight to the point where the bobbin, so again, the bobbin is white, it would show up on the top of the threads. We don't want that. We only want the color that we're picking at the top. And if I loosen it too much, then the threads kind of look like spaghetti, and that also doesn't look very nice. So the goal is that you want to play around with your tension until you find the right setting for you. Now, this is constantly going to change based on two things: the fabric that you're using. So let's say if I'm using a t-shirt, maybe an acrylic felt, or even some jean jackets, that tension is going to change a little bit, as well as what stabilizer you are using. And if you don't know what stabilizers are, we have a couple videos, as well as we have a couple videos on how to hoop this, because hooping is another thing when it comes to machine embroidery. These are classic hoops. This is a no-show mesh cutaway, which is great for fabrics that are stretchy, and this is just a fabric felt. Now, these together combined create a tension for your machine. If I were to keep the same stabilizer, but I switch the top fabric, for example, to this shirt, the tension might be slightly different. But if I switch to maybe a tearaway stabilizer and I use a jean jacket, then the tension will then again be slightly different. So you want to play around with it. And if you have extra fabrics to spare, what I suggest you do is always create a test using a proper design or the design you want to embroider. So what you do is you grab your stabilizer, which we'll get into in a second, your fabric, you test out the design. If it comes out good, then you can record it at the bottom, and that way you can always remember what tension you want to use. Now, there are quite a few different types of stabilizers that you can get, which can confuse a lot of machine embroidery beginners. We do have a whole video talking about stabilizers if you guys want to check that out, but we also have tutorials that are coming out regularly that teach you what stabilizer you should use for different types of fabrics. So make sure to check them out. I'm going to link them all in the description. To simplify it for now, there are two types of stabilizers. One of them is called cutaway, and the other one is called tearaway. Like their names, cutaway, like this one, this is a no-show mesh cutaway. You can't tear it off. You have to cut it with scissors. Versus tearaway, which is kind of a popular one for new embroiderers, is the one where you can simply rip it off. Now, a lot of new embroiderers like to use tearaway for everything, and that's one of the reasons why their designs aren't coming out as crispy as they should be. It's because tearaway doesn't necessarily work best for fabrics that are stretchy. So for example, this t-shirt, if I were to use tearaway, it would pucker a little bit and it just wouldn't stabilize the fabric as well as it would if I used a no-show mesh cutaway. So just make sure you check out those tutorials because it goes a little bit more in depth on how to use stabilizers, and it's a really good thing to understand and follow. Now let's get into the fun part, and that is design files. Of course we want to have our own design files. Embroidery machines have the ability for you to plug in your own USB or even Wi-Fi at this point, where you can just plug it into your machine and select the custom file that you want. And on the interface of all embroidery machines, it's very similar. You click the USB option, you select the design. Now, very important, if you see that your design is grayed out or it just doesn't show up at all, there's two reasons. One, you either didn't have the right machine file format, because every different machine brand has its own machine file format. Brother uses PES, some are HUS. It really depends on your machine. So once again, ensure that you do your research. And the second problem is that the design that you imported is bigger than the maximum hoop size. Once again, this machine can only do 4x4. So if I were to input a design that's even 101 millimeters, it wouldn't let me embroider it because it's bigger than the maximum hoop size. So remember, do your research. Always ensure that the design that you get is smaller than the maximum hoop. So for this one, the maximum I'd ever want to get is 99.9 millimeters for 100. Now, in the interface of the machine, you can do quite a few things like resizing, moving around, rotating, reflecting. Normally, all machines have the same options, but one common thing that new users do is they like to resize their design a lot on the machine. Now, I highly advise against doing this because whenever you're resizing a design, it doesn't mean that it's taking away stitches. All it's doing doing is it's pushing them together even more, which means that some stitches will be stacked on top of each other, and it'll cause your machine to keep breaking, having break threads, or potentially even rip your fabrics. So try to avoid resizing your design as much as you can on your machine, and instead make sure that you get the right size from the beginning, or if you have a program software and the native file to that design, then you can resize it and the program will natively reduce the stitches as you make it smaller. There's quite a bit of digitizing theory that goes into embroidery that a lot of people don't understand. It is the difference of what makes good designs, and unfortunately a lot of new users get into the embroidery world having everything they need, but they have a really bad design and it turns out really bad, and they think it's my machine, I don't know how to embroider, when in reality it's the design itself that wasn't properly digitized using the right theory, and it can cause a lot of frustration and disappointment. Which goes to the next topic, is making sure, especially as a beginner, that you get professionally done designs. And the reason why you should get professional designs is so you can see what a good design looks like on an embroidery machine, and you can start to understand how it stitches out compared to bad designs. Now we do have 11 free designs available. 2 of them are secret that you'll find out, because we want you guys to understand what it's like to embroider professional designs for free, so make sure to check them out in the link in the description. Now of course the reason why we got into embroidery is to create our own custom designs, so there are 2 options to that. You can either learn how to digitize them yourself by getting a software, or you can hire out a digitizer. Now both of them have pros and cons. For example, when it comes to hiring your own digitizer, you run the risk of not necessarily knowing the quality that they actually deliver, and again going back to the idea that you want to make sure you get good designs so you get great results. If you don't know what a good production design looks like, the digitizer may not know either, and you end up struggling with embroidering a bad quality design. Now on the other side, you have to spend some time learning how to use the software and learning the foundations of digitizing. But if you're interested in this craft, learning the foundations are vital to the success of your embroidery. Even if you're not planning on digitizing all the time, knowing the foundations is going to help you problem solve any issues you may encounter on your embroidery machine. You'll be able to see that some stitches aren't stitching out right. You'll understand what makes a bulletproof design, how to connect your stitches together for faster embroidery results. So in reality, you do get a lot of value from learning how to digitize yourself, even if you don't do it every single day. And last but not least, the most important thing, and this is something that I wish someone told me when I started my own journey, and that is to have patience and to practice, practice, practice. I do remember there were times where I gave up and I didn't want to use the machine, nor did I want to digitize, because it felt very confusing. I felt like maybe embroidery just wasn't for me, and that just wasn't the case, because embroidery ultimately is for everyone. It is a beautiful hobby that does take practice to understand and master. But if you do decide to invest in the craft and utilize the resources that we've provided for you, you'll notice how quickly you'll get better at it. And embroidery is one of the most peaceful and fun hobbies or businesses that you can do for yourself. So guys, that's the overview and everything that you need to know on how to start embroidering. Again, all the links will be in the description. John and I go a little bit deeper on every single subject, and if you have any questions, please leave them down in the comments, because we love to answer them and potentially create a future video for you guys. Now, if you're still super confused and you don't know how to get started on how to embroider anything, make sure you watch these videos next, and we'll see you guys on the next tutorial. Take care, Legacy family, and good luck with all your embroidery. See you on the next one.